Good morning. Welcome to Rising. We have another fantastic show for you all today. And of course, Briahna Joy Gray is back with us. Hello, Briahna.
Hello, Robby. It's good to be back.
What is on our agenda today?
Well, Craig Pasta-Jardula will be joining us later to break down the aftermath of leftist Lula da Silva's victory over right-wing Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. Plus, we'll talk midterms with our rising panelists, Sabrina Slavati and Michael La Rosa. But first, the San Francisco District Attorney has announced a slew of charges against Paul Pelosi's alleged attacker, David Depape, including residential burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, elder abuse, false imprisonment of an elder, threats to a public official and their family, and attempted murder. If convicted, Depape will face between 13 years and life in prison.
Well, according to interview filings made public by the Justice Department yesterday, Depape told investigators he was fighting against tyranny without surrender and that he broke through a glass door in the Pelosi's home last week with the intention of holding Nancy Pelosi hostage. Depape also said that in order to hold her accountable as the, quote, leader of the pack of lies told by the Democratic Party, he would hold her hostage until she told the truth and then break her kneecaps if she lied. Depape also later explained that by breaking her kneecaps, she would then have to be wheeled into Congress. It's all pretty horrifying. This would show other members purportedly of Congress that there were consequences for their actions. Now, as far as the night's timeline goes, Depape has told police, and we've been able to see a copy of that report, so this is what he told the police he was doing. After the break-in, he woke up a sleeping Paul Pelosi, told him Nancy was not home, and then at some point, Mr. Pelosi was able to call 911. Depape began to hit Pelosi with the same hammer he had used to break in after officers had already arrived on the scene, and Depape said the assault served as Pelosi's punishment for alerting the authorities in the first place. All pretty horrifying stuff. I mean, it's a house break-in, essentially, and we wish Paul Pelosi speedy recovery. It's good that he was able to call the police at all. This was bad. It could have been far worse. And frankly, the behavior of a lot of right-wing media figures on this topic has just been abysmal over the last few days. Look, yes, we didn't know exactly what had happened. How did he get in? We have questions about what is the kind of security situation at the Pelosi house. There was some early confusion in the report, but frankly, there is always confusion in what we hear in high-profile crime incidents. There's always some, wait, how many people was it involved? Who were they? What? Like that always happens, and you just have to shut your mouth for 48 hours and then you'll know. Yeah. And so we know there was no third person. There was well, who opened the door? Pelosi opened the door. How did that? And also we can plainly see from even a very cursory 30-second Googling of who this guy is, that he is, frankly, it is fine to say he is someone with severe mental health issues, who has delusions and paranoia and thinks there are creatures that are there and out to get him. This is a profile of a mentally harmed man who broke in and did this, and I don't even want to give any credence to them, but there were all these, did he invite them in? Was it some kind of hookup or something? Festering in some of the extremist swamps that there was no reason whatsoever to think any of that.
Well, there's a couple of points to that. One is, even if it had been a hookup, even assuming the most kind of bizarre factual pattern that people were projecting onto the situation when there was imperfect knowledge earlier, I would still argue that it's a very bad thing to have someone bash your head in with a hammer, and that there should have been a level of sympathy, just human sympathy for someone who was not themselves a political actor, is ultimately a civilian in all of this, being attacked in that way. That wasn't forthcoming. Moreover, of course, most people who commit a crime of this nature are not what I would call mentally all together. But there has been, I think, an effort to downplay the political nature of this, insofar as I saw some commentators on Fox News discussing this as a crime issue, the implication being that because Democrats are quote unquote soft on crime, that somehow Nancy Pelosi brought this on herself, or that this was a kind of a crime that happened in a normal, randomized sense that violent crime happens, when of course it was not. The Pelosis were targeted precisely because, as we saw in the statement that you just read, precisely because of her role politically as the head of the Democratic caucus. So it was an odd move. We've talked on this show a lot about how we have to be very sensitive about blaming figures for the acts of random crazy people out in the world, and that I think that's completely true. At the same time, I don't think it's fair to not describe this as a politically motivated event when it obviously is. You can do that, I think, without attributing direct blame to any one figure, even a party.
I mean, there's certainly at least a veneer of a political agenda to this. He was describing a political rationale. He is also very crazy. That is a thing we have seen in the past with, I would put, Jared Loughner, the Gabby Giffords shooter, it was a political attack, and he sort of had an agenda, but it was actually not. But he was very crazy, and it was not because he saw Sarah Palin, making a target on Gabby Giffords' district or something like that. But the guy who shot Reagan was trying to date Jodie Foster. I mean, there's a mix of crazy and then some political interest that intersects for some people. But I hear your point. Obviously, we should ratchet down the extreme and alarming political rhetoric just going on in general, because this is not a healthy way for society to comport itself, and it's tearing us apart, and it's making us very angry at each other and very polarized. I would say that independent of any kind of concern about new political violence or some wave of political violence or something. I don't think there's a wave of political violence happening, but this is very bad stuff, and people should tone it down. And people, including the right, when they want to make criticisms of the mainstream media for getting things wrong all the time, which I agree, the mainstream media does get things wrong all the time, but you have to be careful. The kind of provocative or media accountability holding people, like the just asking questions crowd, did not acquit themselves very well the last few days. Yeah,
and moreover, I do think that there have been comments by Carrie Lake that were she made a joke about the Paul Pelosi attack. I think it was Donald Trump Jr. who posted a picture of underwear and a hammer and implied that would be a funny Halloween costume. I do think it is unfair to say generalized Republican rhetoric caused this crazy person to do what they did, but after the fact of the attack, I think individuals have to be responsible for the messaging that they're putting out there in the world as well. What would they say
if a Republican figure? I mean, like Brett Kavanaugh, when his house was visited, I said, "This is horrible. We should be alarmed about this." Would anyone have tolerated Democrats making fun of that? No, they would jump all over them for that.
Well, I think if someone hit Brett Kavanaugh in the head with a hammer, and a Democrat subsequently, if Cori Bush then said, "LOL, I'm going to address as bloody head Brett Kavanaugh for Halloween," sure, certainly some people would think it was okay. I don't know that those people would be right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They would not be right.
So this is where we are.
They would not be right. Yeah. All right, My Radar is next. Stay tuned for that.